I lie to protect you. Just hearing the word lie is enough for most people to think of wrongdoing, betrayal, and hurt. In the minds of many, lying means hiding the truth for selfish purposes, to escape responsibility, to gain personal benefit, or to manipulate others. From the time we were young, we were taught, lying is bad. Lying makes you a bad kid. Liars can't be trusted. Those lessons follow us into adulthood, becoming a measure of morality, a line dividing what is right from what is wrong. But in this life, are all lies truly the same? There are lies that wound deeply, lies that shatter trust and destroy relationships. But there are also lies born not from selfishness, but from the fear of hurting someone we love. Lies told not to avoid the truth, but because the speaker lacks the courage to let the other person face that truth too soon. These are what people call white lies, lies born from love, from silent sacrifice, from the desire to preserve a small piece of peace for someone else, even if it means carrying the entire burden alone. In reality, not everyone is strong enough to face the truth at every moment. Some deaths happen too suddenly, some tragedies are too overwhelming, and some losses, if revealed even a little earlier, could crush a child's entire childhood. So there are people who choose to keep the truth for themselves, wrapping it in something called a lie, just to spare the ones they love from immediate pain. But a lie, even one born from love, is still a seed of guilt. The person who lies must live with an invisible battle every day, between telling the truth to free themselves and staying silent to protect someone else. It is a loneliness no one sees. It is the endless nights spent wondering, am I doing the right thing? Or am I stealing their right to know the truth? Some lies last minutes, some last years, and some last a lifetime. Day by day, the lie grows heavier. Each smile from the person being protected becomes another quiet stab into the heart of the one who is sacrificing. Yet they endure, because to them, their own pain is nothing compared to witnessing the despair of someone they love. People are quick to judge a lie, but few stop to ask, why did they lie? Behind a lie can be an entire story, a story of tears, helplessness, and a heart that chooses to hurt in place of another. Some people lie not to lighten their own burden, but to lessen someone else's pain. Some willingly accept being misunderstood, even hated, just to preserve a fragile moment of peace for someone dear to them. A family, the place where love and sacrifice are intertwined, is also where white lies appear the most. Parents lie to keep their children from worrying. Children lie to spare their parents from stress. Husbands lie to hide their struggles. Wives lie to shield their partners from hardship. These lies may look harmless on the surface, but inside them are storms of torment. There is a kind of lie that costs someone their entire life. The lie told to protect a child. When a father or mother chooses to hide the truth about death, illness, or loss, they quietly prepare themselves for the day that truth comes to light, the day when the child they love most may see them as the liar. They accept being misunderstood. They accept the blame. They accept the title of the one who hid the truth, just so their child can grow up without carrying a wound too heavy for their young heart. The story I'm about to tell is about a lie that lasted 7 years. A lie told by a father. A lie not born from selfishness, but from the profound love of a husband for his wife, and the unconditional love of a father for his child. It is a story of tears, waiting, resentment, and understanding that came far too late. A story where the truth was never erased, only held back. A double-edged blade, cutting the one who keeps it every single day, yet shielding a fragile child from the brutal harshness of reality. Perhaps, after hearing this story, we will finally understand. And not all lies are evil, but no lie comes without scars. And sometimes, The most painful thing is not learning the truth, but realizing that someone had to carry that truth alone for years, just so we could grow up in peace. The love story of my parents began on a day of heavy rain, when the sky seemed to pour everything it had onto the small riverside village. That day, my father was still a poor young man, doing whatever work he could find to survive. Sometimes helping at construction sites, sometimes harvesting rice for hire. Whoever called, he worked for. All he owned back then was an old tiled roof house, a few worn-out clothes, and a pair of rough, calloused hands shaped by years of labor. My mother, on the other hand, was completely different from him. She was the only daughter of a well-off family at the head of the village. She had a pair of sad yet deep eyes, and a gentle smile that lingered in the mind of anyone who saw it even once. That day, on her way home from the district market, her bicycle broke down just as the rain began pouring violently. With no shelter nearby, she ran toward my father's house, the only place with a small roof wide enough for a few people to squeeze under and escape the storm. Father was mending his fishing nets inside when he heard noise outside. He stepped out and saw a young woman drenched from head to toe, her hair clinging to her cheeks. He was so flustered he didn't know what to say. He simply pulled out an old wooden chair and stammered, "Please, come inside, so you won't get wetter." Mother nodded softly, placed her basket on the table, and raindrops dripped onto the earthen floor. Outside, the rain fell in thick sheets. Inside, two strangers sat across from each other in silence. Only the sound of the rain and the pounding of two nervous hearts filling the small space. The rain went on for a long time, long enough for Father, fumbling and shy, to brew a pot of hot tea for her, long enough for Mother to explain that her bicycle had broken down, long enough for the two of them to really look at each other for the first time, and long enough for an invisible string to begin, quietly tying their destinies together. When the rain finally stopped, Father helped push Mother's bicycle back out to the village road. Before leaving, she turned back to him, smiled gently, and said, "Thank you for today." Just one simple sentence, yet Father carried it in his heart for the rest of his life. From that day on, Father found every excuse to see her again. Sometimes he pretended to pass by her house to buy small things. Sometimes he went to the market at the same time she did. At first, Mother saw him as just a familiar stranger. But little by little, Father's sincerity, awkwardness, and honesty slipped quietly into her heart, until she fell for him without realizing it. They loved each other in silence. On late afternoons by the riverbank, Father would share his simple dreams, a small house, a few plots of rice fields, warm meals every day, and a good child someday. Mother would sit quietly and listen, then smile. She never dreamed of luxury. All she ever wanted was someone who truly loved her. But once their families found out, storm clouds began to gather. Father's family was poor and feared they couldn't provide for her. Mother's family fiercely opposed the relationship, partly because Father was poor, partly because Mother was their only daughter, expected to marry someone proper and equal. They told her, "If you marry him, you'll have to bear the hardships yourself." Father was also summoned, questioned, scrutinized. Someone even told him bluntly, "What do you have to offer their daughter?" He stood silently, fists clenched. He had no money, no status, nothing except the love in his heart. And in one confrontation with Mother's family, he said the one sentence I remember for life: "I can't promise her wealth, but I promise she will never be lonely as long as I live." It wasn't fancy. It wasn't poetic. But it went straight into Mother's heart. She believed him, with all her youth, with all her naive, wholehearted love. After countless fights and tears, her family eventually gave in, partly out of love, partly because they saw the unwavering devotion between the two. Their wedding had no grand tents, No shimmering gold jewelry. Just a few simple tables in the yard. Some wildflowers picked from the roadside. And wooden benches borrowed from neighbors. Mother didn't wear a white wedding gown. She wore an old Ao dye borrowed from her cousin. Yet on that day, she was the most beautiful bride I have ever heard described. Father stood beside her, nervous like a child. From the ceremony to serving tea to the relatives, his hands kept trembling. But the way he looked at Mother, steady, certain, told everyone that he had found his entire life in the eyes of the woman beside him. Mother smiled the whole day, a bright, clear smile without a trace of regret. Wealth had never mattered to her. What mattered was that, through every hardship, Father held her hand and never let go. On that day, in their small old roofed home, my parents officially began their life together. No luxury, no abundance, but they had something full to the brim, love and trust. In the early days after the wedding, Father worked from dawn until late evening. Mother stayed home, tending every corner of the house, preparing every meal with care. Every coin Father earned, he handed to her. Every meal Mother cooked, she waited for him to return so they could eat together. On stormy nights, when he was late, she would sit at the doorway, watching the road, worried sick. They didn't have much money, but they had overflowing affection. When they argued, Father was always the first to soften his voice. Mother held grudges longer, but every time she saw Father awkwardly apologizing, her anger melted away. They were two people who seemed born to complete each other. Father once said, "If it weren't for that rain, I probably would have never dared to look up at your mother." Mother laughed and replied, "If it weren't for that rain, I might never have found the man who would hold my hand for a lifetime." They walked through poverty and hardship together with a simple belief. As long as their hands were still joined, no storm could break them. But neither of them knew that a much greater storm awaited them in the future. A storm called separation. A storm that would force my father to make the most painful decision of his life. The decision to tell a lie that would last 7 years. All because of me. I was born on a warm early summer morning. The sun was shining beautifully. Sunlight slipped through the small window, falling gently onto my mother's exhausted yet radiant face. My father stood beside the bed, as awkward as he had been on their wedding day, not knowing where to put his hands. When my first cry echoed through the room, he turned away quickly, but I still caught the slight trembling of his shoulders. It was then I learned, the strongest man I would ever know could also cry from happiness. Mother held me in her arms, her face thin but her eyes endlessly tender. "He looks just like you." Father smiled, a smile filled with both joy and worry, because from that moment on, resting on his shoulders was not just the weight of being a husband, but the much heavier weight of becoming a father. Our house was still as poor as before, a small home with an old, tiled roof that leaked whenever it rained. On stormy days, my mother would place basins everywhere to catch the dripping water. Father would wipe the floor and joke, "Someday, when we save enough, we'll fix this roof." Mother patted his head, "As long as we have enough to eat and wear, and our family stays healthy, that's enough." Life was poor, but always warm. Father left for work before sunrise. Some days he worked at construction sites. Other days he followed people to the fields to plant or harvest rice. Every evening he came, home smelling of wind and sunlight, sweat soaking the back of his shirt. Mother always saved the fullest portion of rice for him, carefully placing pieces of fish and vegetables into his bowl. He always gave them back. "You eat more, you're the one raising our child." Our meals were simple. Morning glory, pickled eggplants, with fish or meat only once in a while. But I never remember a single meal without laughter. When I first learned to walk, Mother held my hands, while Father stood a few steps away with open arms. "Come to Daddy." I wobbled, took tiny steps, fell, and Mother rushed to catch me. Father chuckled. "It's okay if she falls. Let her learn to get up on her own." I stood again, walked again, fell again. And in the sound of Father's encouraging laughter and mothers clapping hands. Learned my very first steps. With love and patience wrapped around me. Evenings in the countryside often meant power outages. The whole village would fall into darkness. Father would place an oil lamp in the middle of the house, its small flame casting flickering shadows on the walls. Mother would lean on Father's shoulder, gently fanning me to sleep. I lay in their warm arms, listening as Father told me stories, fairy tales, stories of his impoverished childhood, stories of who I might become one day, a doctor, a teacher, or anything I wished. You can be whatever you want, as long as you live kindly. Every time Father said that, Mother would smile, her eyes shimmering in the wavering light of the lamp. On hot summer nights during blackouts, we would lie on mats outside the front porch to catch the breeze. The wind from the rice fields blew cool against our skin. Frogs croaked endlessly in the distance. Father sat leaning against a pillar. Mother rested her head on his shoulder. I lay between them, staring up at the sky full of stars and asked, "Why are there so many stars, Daddy?" "Because heaven wants to give you many dreams." I believed him. And every night, I whispered my little wishes to the stars, wishing for good grades, wishing for my parents' health, wishing that our tiny home would always be filled with laughter. My childhood grew from such simple things. No expensive toys, no new clothes every season, but I had an entire sky of love inside that little house. Whenever I got sick, Father worried the most. He carried me everywhere looking for medicine, stayed awake through the night fanning me so I could sleep. Mother sat beside me, wiping my sweat and whispering, "Hang in there, my child. You'll feel better tomorrow." I grew up wrapped in their tenderness without even realizing it. On rainy evenings, Father often came home late. Mother stood at the doorway, waiting for every shadow that passed. I could see the worry in her eyes whenever she heard the sound of a motorbike approaching. When she finally saw Father coming home drenched, she sighed in relief and rushed out. "Why didn't you come home earlier in this rain? The work at the site wasn't finished yet. Don't worry." She scolded him, but her hands quickly grabbed a towel to dry his hair, washed his wet clothes, and reheated dinner. Their love was never loud or showy. It lived in the small things, a bowl of rice filled to the brim, a carefully mended shirt, a quiet gaze that followed each other everywhere. Time passed, and I grew up in that peaceful happiness. I never thought of loss. In my tiny world back then, my parents were the entire sky. Our small house was the safest place on earth. I truly believed, as long as I had them, I would never be afraid of anything. On summer afternoons, Mother lulled me to sleep with old folk songs. The wind rustled through the tiles. Father lay in the hammock outside, rocking gently. I fell asleep peacefully, not knowing that happiness was just like those afternoon naps. Calm, tender, and fragile, enough to be blown away by a single strong wind. Those years drifted by slowly, peacefully, like a small river. No storms, no chaos, only love flowing endlessly through each day. And in that tender part of my life, I believed, wholeheartedly, that my family would stay happy like that forever. I had no idea that behind those peaceful days, fate was quietly preparing for my family the harshest turning point of our lives. The happiness in my family didn't disappear all at once. It cracked from the smallest, quietest things, so subtle that if one wasn't attentive enough, they would easily overlook it. At first, I only noticed that my mother was more tired than before. At first, I only noticed that my mother was more tired than before. In the afternoons, she no longer sat outside waiting for my father, but often lay inside with her eyes closed. She told me, "Mom's just a little tired. Go play in the yard, sweetheart." And I believed her. Children do that, when told, "Mom is okay," every worry melts instantly. But my father wasn't like me. He began to notice every little thing. During meals, whenever Mom took less food, he watched her for a long time. When she put her bowl down earlier than usual, he said nothing, just quietly served her a bit more. "Eat a little more, you've grown so thin lately." Mom smiled, a fragile smile. I just have a poor appetite these days. But that poor appetite lasted day after day. She ate less and less. Some days she only managed a few sips of thin porridge before turning away. Even the dishes she once loved couldn't tempt her anymore. She became so thin that her old clothes suddenly looked far too big for her. Her face grew hollow, and the sadness in her deep eyes became even deeper. Back then, I was too young to understand what serious illness meant. All I knew was that she coughed a lot. At first, they were just light coughs. But then they turned into long, violent fits that shook her whole body, her chest heaving as if it might burst. Some nights, I woke up suddenly, because her coughs echoed painfully through the small, quiet house. The sound tore through the darkness and tightened my heart. My father always woke up first. He lit the oil lamp in a hurry, helped her sit up, one hand rubbing her back, the other trembling as he held a cup of water. Drink some water, slowly. Mom coughed as tears streamed down her thin cheeks, falling onto my father's hands like little drops of fire. He didn't say anything. He just bowed his head, rubbing her back gently, as though he could soothe all her pain with his hands alone. I stood at the bedroom door, watching. I was scared, so scared that I didn't dare move. For the first time, I felt something vague yet heavy, fear. I wanted to run to her, to ask if she was hurting. But when I saw the look in my father's eyes, the look of someone trying desperately to hide panic and helplessness, I froze like a shadow on the wall. After that night, her coughs only grew more frequent. During the day, she still tried to act normal. She swept the yard, cooked, washed clothes. But each time she bent down or stood up, she would hold onto the wall to steady herself. Once, she coughed so hard while sweeping that she dropped the broom and sank to the ground. My father rushed over. Let me do it. Go inside and rest. Mom shook her head. I can still do it. You need to work and earn money. He didn't argue. He just gently took the broom from her hand. The atmosphere in the house changed. Laughter became rare. The evenings without electricity, once filled with stories and warmth, became quiet and heavy. Mom no longer leaned on Dad's shoulder for long, because doing so triggered more coughing. Dad no longer told fairy tales with the same excitement. I didn't know why, only that something invisible was slowly creeping into our home. One night, I woke up unexpectedly. The house was unusually silent. I heard whispers from my parents' room. I tiptoed closer and peered through the slightly open door. My father was sitting at the edge of the bed, holding my mother's hands tightly. The faint oil lamp lit his face, tired, darkened with worry, and my mother's pale, exhausted one. His voice was hoarse. Should we tell the child? Mom shook her head weakly, as though afraid I'd hear. No, not yet. The child is still too young. But like this, I'm afraid one day, the child won't understand. She squeezed his hand gently, her voice barely above a breath. I know, but think about it. If the child learns the truth now, how will they live? My father lowered his head. A tear fell onto her hand. Mom lifted her trembling fingers to wipe it away. Let the child stay carefree a little longer, please. Standing outside the door, I didn't understand everything they said. But I understood this. Something very serious was happening to our family. After that day, Dad began taking Mom to the clinic. Early in the mornings, he drove her to town. I stayed with the neighbors. Each time she left, I tugged at her shirt. Where are you going, Mom? Mom's going to buy medicine to get better, sweetheart. I looked up and saw the forced smile on her face. And I believed it. I always believed it. The medicine increased. Herbs, tonics, little pills in pink and white filled the table. After taking them, Mom often lay still for a long time. Some days she vomited until she had no strength left. Dad could only hold her, helpless as she grew thinner with each passing day. At night, when I was already asleep, my father cried. I only learned this later, when I was old enough to understand. Back then, all I noticed was how quiet he became, how his forehead wrinkled deeper and deeper in such a short time. Mom still tried to live as if nothing was wrong. She still woke early to cook, still mended his clothes, still washed mine. But every smile on her face grew more tired than the last. And then, some nights, her coughing became endless. She coughed until she collapsed in his arms. My father panicked, lifting her up, calling her name through sobs. I hid in a corner, covering my ears, trembling in fear. I didn't know what illness was. I didn't know what death was. I only knew that since Mom fell ill, our home was no longer filled with laughter. In my father's every breath, in my mother's every cough, in my own sleepless nights, something dark and terrifying was growing. But no matter how much pain she was in, Mom always held Dad's hand and whispered, "Don't let the child know, please." And Dad, with all the love of a husband and a father, nodded through tears. That was the moment the lie began, a lie that would last for the next 7 years. The day my father took my mother to the hospital, it was raining again. The rain poured down as if the entire sky had collapsed onto the muddy road leading to the town. The mud clung to every step, making each movement feel heavy, like dragging along a heart being scraped raw by pain. Mother was already very weak by then. She had grown so thin that even the light coat draped over her seemed too large. Her whole body felt weightless, as if a strong gust of wind could blow her away. Father carried her on his back, step by step, slow, trembling, and burdened. His back bent forward. His hair was soaked through with rain. I followed behind, my small sandals sinking deep into the mud, cold rainwater seeping into my skin. I ran while crying, "Mom, please don't go." Mother turned her head back, through the blurry rain. Her pale smile looked so fragile I couldn't bear to look at it for long. She tried to raise her thin arm to reach for me, but it only lifted halfway before falling weakly back down. That was the last time I saw my mother stand on her own feet. The small-town hospital was old and worn. The sharp smell of disinfectant seeped into every breath. People rushed in and out, the sound of footsteps, stretchers rolling, voices calling out. Mother was taken into the emergency room on a cold metal stretcher. The door slammed shut. Father stood outside, his trembling hands not knowing what to hold onto. I curled up in the hallway corner, hugging my knees. My clothes were drenched with rain, but I didn't feel cold. My heart was colder than everything around me. A long time later, the door finally opened. The doctor came out, saying many things I couldn't understand. I only saw Father nodding over and over, his face turning paler with each word. When the doctor left, Father sank into a chair, covering his face with his hands. I ran to him. "Dad, how is Mom?" He lifted his head. His eyes looked strange, full of pain, but he still placed his hand gently on my head. "Mom is very tired. She needs to stay in the hospital for treatment." I believed him. I always believed him. Mother was moved to a hospital room. The small white-walled room glowed under the cold fluorescent light. She lay motionless on the bed, and 4 needles pierced her thin hand. The drip fell slowly into her fragile veins. I had never seen my mother like that, so delicate, so pale, as distant as a dream fading into nothing. Each time she opened her eyes, Father leaned close and whispered, "I'm here." Mother looked at him, her cracked lips moving faintly. "Let me see our child." Father carried me closer. I held her hand. It was unnervingly cold. Mother stroked my hair gently, so gently it felt like a breeze passing through. "Be good, and listen to your father." I nodded hard. "Mom, get better soon and come home with me, okay?"